So you can still find this inevitable feeling, but it's increasingly rare as centralized platforms seep into every city, town, our homes, our lives. We're missing that feeling when you sold a dozen boxes of Girl Scout cookies to your neighbor Margie, or when Carol let you ride the bus with your lizard for show and tell. Or that feeling when you broke in those kangaroo leather soccer cleats fighting blisters so that they formed perfectly to your feet. There was a time when everything was local, even personal, to you. We're nostalgic for something that most of us merely glimpsed. We blinked, and suddenly the internet had brought hyper-globalization and centralized platforms to all of us. Personalization today dances around under false pretenses. We see personalized ads, custom orders, precision medicine. But usually this is just a euphemism for a data asymmetry. Corporations and institutions know more about you than you do. Through data aggregation, platforms target you again and again. Our inboxes are overflowing with personalized ads and emails. Yet we remain in the dark, knowing ourselves through these corporate tarots, in awe of the algorithm. Nowadays, instead of browsing the aisle of your local corner store, you log into Amazon. You scroll endlessly. Maybe you add a few items to your cart. Did you even select them, or did Amazon's algorithm pick them for you? Maybe you saw it on TikTok. You really can't remember. It's hard to feel nostalgic for the generalized digital storefront characteristic of Web 2. If we fast forward 50 years, this hyper-personalized trend feels a bit more dystopian. A world where every aspect of your life is optimized to suit your individual needs and preferences. Maybe it's a refrigerator that orders food for you based on your continuous blood glucose monitor. Or maybe it's an app that optimizes all of your messages based on your brainwaves or circadian rhythm. Or maybe it's software that shows you every detail of your purchase down to who you were with. When ownership is alienated from the individual and community, the hyper-personalized future that affords us these levels of comfort, efficiency, and well-being cost us our privacy and autonomy. In other words, personalization is great as long as it's not extractive. We're stuck in this uncanny valley of personalization in Web 2, but ownership of our tools can unlock true personalization. The future is dark if we don't own it. So this drive towards a niche as small as you, can be seen in the trend of the long tail. For those of you not familiar with Chris Anderson's theory that predicted the creator economy, influencer marketing, and platform monopolies, the long tail is simple. The area under the tail is equal to or greater than the area under the curve. So Anderson identified the opportunity of Web 2 as just selling more items to more people as less quantities, which really just means that there's a market for the niche as opposed to before where there was only room on the shelf for a few hit items. Amazon best exemplifies this. I'm really not sure what you can't buy on Amazon. So as Web 2's drive to capture the niche becomes more and more dystopian, I couldn't help but wonder how Web 3 changes our relationship to personalization by introducing the ownership missing from Web 2. So I hypothesize that the long tail can be much longer in Web 3. Technology trends towards democratization, and Web 3 is really no different. The rise of peer-to-peer technologies such as sovereign identity, decentralized storage, and networked computing unlock a previously scary and dystopian future made fun and personal by owning your tools. True personalization can only occur when individuals and communities shape their tools and hopefully reap those benefits. Whereas platforms capture the value of the long tail in Web 2, the long tail of Web 3 will be owned by you and your community. If the long tail of Web3 can be almost infinite, then I think we agree that the opportunity here is great. All right, so what's Web3? I think we're all pretty familiar with this paradigm, this read, write, own paradigm, right? Web 1 was read only. Web 2, you could read and write. Web 3, read, write, and own. But I think own is really misinterpreted here. It seemed to be interpreted as its own isolated category. And really, I think own applies to read and write itself. By owning read and write, we and our communities become truly autonomous. Instead of relying on a platform to dictate what we can and cannot do, owning our tools allows for the ultimate personalization. We shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. This is a favorite quote of ours, and I believe an ethos shared here in the Ethereum community. Before the internet, our relationship with our tools looked like this, pretty simple. We had direct access to our tools. Now, as platforms have mediated our experience and access to tools, it looks something like this, which kind of feels like this. This isn't to say that Web 2 hasn't afforded us niche, somewhat personal goods and services. It's just that we're completely dependent on these platforms to shape the tools that then shape us. We're already seeing many backlash against this, right? Here's some choice media headlines. But creators are really the canonical example of alienation from their tools and ownership of their tools. Creators don't own their access to write or publish information. They are reliant on platforms to tell them to whom, when they can publish, and also just their own access to capital, right? So it's akin to building a house, but then you say you borrowed the tools from Home Depot. And so after you're done building that house, Home Depot actually owns that house and everything in the house. So not only are we alienated from our tools, but we're also alienated from anything that our tools generate, such as our data. And data aggregation is what Web 2 is reliant on to connect you to a niche good. As I said before, it's fundamentally fueled by this data asymmetry and just privacy violations. Some revere the algorithm that's fed by this data aggregation as like a god. They see the For You page as, oh, it's really meant for me. But sometimes it's also just so off. It really leaves you wondering, like, is this for me? And I mean, it's just indicative of how these platforms are doing, thankfully, an incomplete job of mining your data. It's remaining siloed between banking institutions, social networks, and medical facilities. We're stuck in this uncanny valley of personalization where you can see one side of yourself reflected in the storefront, but never the whole, where we're at the mercy of these platforms to dictate access and agency, and where everything looks the same but just slightly different. So dApps also, though, fail at personalization today. While Web3 is, been focused on the global consensus layer, is unwittingly propagated a less personalized version of Web 2. Web3 has only unbundled the global parts of Web 2, such as payments and data storage, so it really can't be personal yet. And dApps today fail at personalization in a lot of the same ways that Web 2 does, right? There's still collecting data on centralized servers, and there's still centralizing software behind a company. It's actually quite difficult to achieve a Web 2-like ease of user experience with a dApp, which uses publicly available data on the blockchain. That means that an NFT marketplace can really only show you transactional data, not your last browsed NFT, not your friend's favorite NFT, not actually the image of the NFT. If any dApp is showing you anything close to this or a recommendation, right, it's running a centralized server. And so a large critique of Web3 is that it's still running on Web 2 infrastructure, or at least imitating the patterns of Web 2. I mean, Who decides what your wallet looks like, what it can do? Like, what 2 to 4 companies does every dApp make API calls to? How many of your communities are using Discord, Notion, Telegram, Google Docs? So we can start to see that our Web3 tools aren't really our own. And Web3 is falling back on the extractive patterns of Web2 to fuel this personalization. To give Web3 some credit, it is starting to get personal, a little bit more personal, right? If global state is Ethereum, local state is L2s, we're still missing personal state. There is a dark Web2 parallel here where Web3, we could decide to write all our personal data to the blockchain. However, this would be expensive and inefficient use of technology. Blockchain, we know, is better suited for recording and verifying transactions rather than storing large amounts of data. But really, not everything should live on a blockchain. Not everything should be public. I don't need consensus on all of my personal activities. Okay. Story time. That feeling when Web3 gets personal. For those of you who are hungover, this is a good time to just close your eyes. You wake up deeply rested in Idaho Springs. Your endocrine system hasn't quite recovered from the ravage of notifications in your young adult life, but it is quiet and calm. You take a stroll to the town square where there's a portal, Community Memory 3. You log into your computer with your biometric ring that also holds your private key. The screen reveals landscape, an OS of sorts, and your dashboard to the digital world. There is a collection of apps, some you've even built yourself. This online environment feels like home. It's instantly familiar, not because you've grown used to it or because it's designed to appear familiar, but because you built it this way. It's an expression of you, not an approximation. Because no one's at the other end of this tool with anything to gain from your engagement or from predicting or motivating your next move. Your tools service you and your community for as long as you need them. You log out and exit the town square, breathing in the fresh Colorado air. Okay, you can open your eyes now. The most fundamental tool that anyone could own in this digital age is our personal computer. While Web3, as I said, has only begun to touch these global parts of Web2, payments and data storage, to become a true competitor and unlock personalization, Web3 needs a personal compute solution. Only then can we realize the long tail of Web3. And so, as I said before, not everything should live on a blockchain. Not everything should be centralized to a centralized server. But I think it should be centralized to you. It should be on a personal server. If we replaced the client-server model with a world of decentralized personal servers, then the cost of distributing truly custom software falls to nearly zero. And the unique combinations of financial, social, and medical data becomes desirable and even possible when your data is centralized to you. Robin Sloan talks of a time when apps are so personal that they're akin to a home-cooked meal. Imagine this for your community, your garden, your DAO. And what's really exciting today is we're actually already seeing some whispers of this future, right? FWB's new app is a great example of a DAO shipping software for its community. Another example is Serving the People, a nonprofit community of artists creating a custom app on Urbit called Cyclopedia. It's kind of like a blog of blogs. And also, this is nothing new with the history of personal computing, right? There were BBSs, Whole Earth Electronic Link. The long tail of Web3 could be so long. Okay, but isn't running a personal server like hard? Sure, normally it is, but we've spent the last decade rewriting the compute stack from the ground up. It's called Urbit. And this is what we at Talon Corporation are working on and building communication and collaboration tools on top of for communities. So the long tail that previously looked like this is really ours to own. The long tail of Web3 will be owned by individuals and communities and will shake up the existing world order. And we'll be the aggregators of Web3, not the monopolistic platforms. As distribution costs fall to nearly zero, local, or to borrow from Robin Sloan, home-cooked software becomes possible. So like FWB or STP, your DAO club or team, or your town co-op or garden can have their own truly custom software. We can follow our nostalgia forward in creating a deeply intimate future. The future is bright as long as we own it. So I'll read this poem that hopefully illustrates just how natural technology can be. I like to think, and the sooner the better, of a cybernetic meadow where mammals and computers live together in mutually programming harmony like pure water touching clear sky. I like to think, right now please, of a cybernetic forest filled with pines and electronics where deer stroll peacefully past computers as if they're flowers with spinning blossoms. I like to think, it has to be, of a cybernetic ecology where we are free of our labors and joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watched over by machines of love and grace. So, if you'd like to learn more or join us in conversation, you can use this QR code here to join the network. Also, feel free to find me later. All right, thank you.